It's easier to do 10-year forecasting than it is 1 or 2-year forecasting. Now that doesn't really make sense. Many people say to me, I can't even do 1 or 2-year forecasting. How can I do 10-year forecasting? Well, it turns out it's easier to do 10-year forecasting than 1 or 2-year forecasting. Let me give you an example. If you look 10 years ahead, you'll see we're going to have a world where there'll be sensors everywhere. They'll be very cheap. Many of those sensors will be connected, and some of those sensors will be in our bodies. That's just obvious as you look 10 years ahead. What's not obvious is how are we going to get from here to there, and who's going to make money from the process. Also, what's not obvious is who's going to make sense out of all that data from all of those sensors. So what I'm suggesting is that if you look 10 years ahead, you see things, you see directions of change, even if the world around you is very complicated. Thinking about the next decade, the world is indeed going to be very complicated. The Army War College, where the generals go to become generals and where I teach once a year, the Army War College calls this the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Looking 10 years ahead, it's going to get worse. And in that kind of world, you can't see what's going to happen. And especially from close in, there's no way you can anticipate, you can predict. The word predict, it just doesn't make any sense in this kind of world. But you can do a forecast. You can look ahead, and you can see that directions, just as I was talking about with sensors. And you can tell a story about the future. And a forecast, in our way of thinking about it at Institute for the Future, a forecast is a story from the future that provokes insight in the present. So again, not a prediction, but a provocation. And we like to think foresight to insight to action. And it's a cycle, an ongoing cycle. We look 10 years ahead and kind of see that clear view, but then we back off and we say, what does that clear view provoke for us? What are the insights? For example, what are the insights for a church in a world where you have sensors everywhere? Very cheap sensors, very connected sensors, some sensors even in our bodies. What are the implications? What are the insights for a world like that? What are the insights for a local parish? So think about this VUCA world. Think about how you can take a forecast of the future. It could be your own personal future, it could be the future of your parish, but look beyond your normal planning horizon, but not so far out that it becomes kind of silly or kind of ridiculous or people won't take you seriously. Usually in my world, working with big corporations, usually it's 10 years. Occasionally, it's even further than that, and it is further than that when things are very polarized. So for example, we just did a forecast on the future of food security. And what we found was this notion of food security is so polarized, particularly in Western Europe, where our client was. Things are so polarized that we had to look 30 years ahead. And when we look 30 years ahead, you could see that the choices are much more of a wide range of choices, and they're not simple yes-no choices. So for example, in the area of food security, GMOs, the genetically modified organisms, GMO foods are so polarized, particularly in Western Europe, that people view it as a yes-no choice. Well, if you look 30 years ahead, it's obvious that it's not a yes-no choice. It's a spectrum of choices. And if you're interested in things like like global hunger, like food security, you have to be interested in food security. So again, that long view gives you a sense of alternatives. And as you're thinking about your own life, think 10 years ahead, think 20 years ahead, think 30 years ahead, but don't stay there. Use that foresight to provoke your insight to lead to action. And interestingly, it doesn't matter if you agree with the forecast you're using or not. It only matters if the forecast provokes you. And indeed, some of the best forecasts that I've ever seen, some of the best forecasts are those you don't like. Those forecasts that you say, I don't want that to happen, or I'm not going to let that happen. So look for provocative. Don't worry about prediction, because nobody can predict the future. I like to say, if somebody tells you they can predict the future, you shouldn't believe them, especially if they're from California. And I'm from California. What you can do is tell this story about the future to provoke insight in the present. So in a VUCA world, and that's where we're in, that's what we're all going to live in for the next decade. In the VUCA world, one thing we've realized is by looking 10 years ahead, you realize that volatility yields to vision. Uncertainty yields to understanding. Complexity yields to clarity. And ambiguity yields to agility. So let's break that down. Volatility yields to vision. In a VUCA world, vision gets rewarded disproportionately. Now, religion and faith, your parish, is a source of vision, and people need vision in a VUCA world. As a matter of fact, there's a frightening side of this. In a VUCA world, people are often looking for answers, even if there aren't any answers. And that's why extreme religions tend to do very well in periods of VUCA world. So you need to provide vision, but you don't want to promise things that can't be promised. You won't want to promise certainty in a world that's loaded with volatility. So uncertainty does yield to understanding. You need to understand your marketplace, your community. You need to understand what's going on around you. You need to understand yourself. So this is a period of VUCA world. It's a period of listening. And in a real sense, what we're doing is listening for the future. It's a period where so many people are talking, and yet so few people are listening. So understanding becomes disproportionately important in a VUCA world. The notion of complexity yields to clarity, but you can't be clear in any simplistic sense in a VUCA world, because it is VUCA. So what you have to do, and what the military has learned, and unfortunately the military is way ahead of the rest of us in this, because in a warfare situation, in the fog of war, you can't be clear about everything, but you can be clear about direction. So in the military, this is called commander's intent. Commander's intent. And I don't recommend that word in a parish or in a corporation. I recommend the word clarity. And in your faith, in the Episcopal faith, you have this wonderful concept of discerning questions. And discerning questions are so useful at trying to understand what's going on, to try to understand that direction. And the principle is to be very clear where you're going, but very flexible how you get there. So set up that envelope of clarity and then be flexible within that. And finally, ambiguity yields to agility. So in the world of the future, in this VUCA world, we all have to be corporate athletes. We all have to be community athletes. We all have to be church athletes. We all have to be athletes. We have to be physically healthy, mentally healthy, and spiritually healthy. We've got to have some sense of meaning in a VUCA world, and it's very hard to get a sense of meaning in a VUCA world. So we all need that. We all need that sense of agility in order to thrive in this world. So thinking 10 years ahead, you get a fresh view of all this complexity. Even if it is a VUCA world, you can still see directions of change, just like with the sensors example I gave you at the start. And what you can do once you have that clarity of direction, that 10-year view, or you might choose to go further, then you can back off using that foresight to provoke your insight that leads you to better action in the present. And that action is going to be characterized not by sort of linear straight line plans, but by cyclical, learn as you go. In Silicon Valley, we call this, you've got to learn how to fail early, fail often, and fail cheaply. It's rapid prototyping your way toward that future direction that you stated with clarity. So I hope this gives you that sense of looking to the future, not to predict it, because the future is unpredictable, but looking to the future in order to understand direction, and then use that foresight to draw out your own insights and plan your own action. Thank you.